from the kitchen today because I want to talk to something about food for children, and I'm a nutritionist as well, and this is something quite dear to my heart, and that's the impact that gluten is having in our society. And it's actually really confusing to know what's gluten-free, what's the difference between gluten-free, wheat-free. So I'm going to try within a couple of minutes to give you a brief overview of what the differences are and how as a parent you can give your children the best nutrition, because things have changed from 20 years ago, things have definitely changed from 30 years ago. When I was growing up, which was 30, 40 years ago, we could get away with eating apple pie at night, we could get away with pancakes, and that was mainly because the wheat that was used in the flour in those days had very little gluten. It's really only been in the last 20 years since wheat has been commercialised to such a high degree, particularly in Russia and America and Australia, that gluten has become more of the grain. Now, gluten is actually a glue part of the grain, and I've pulled a picture off the internet just to show you. So you'll see here, where I've coloured it in yellow, that's kind of the inside part of the grain, and that's where the gluten's contained. The outside bit's just the bran or the husk, and that'll often fall away. And if you get something that's got whole grain, it'll have that part and that. If you just get something that's made from white or refined flour, it'll only have this. And nowadays it's primarily going to be gluten, and which is a protein combined with a little bit of starch. So what gluten does, I'll just digress. Gluten is found on not just wheat, it's also found in rye, it's also found in barley, and it's also found in rolled oats made in some countries. Oats are an interesting thing. So here's some rolled oats here. So they're what we make porridge out of. If you can get organic overseas rolled oats, chances are they won't have much gluten as part of the grain. If they're a commercially grown oat in Australia, America, or even parts of Eurasia, chances are it's going to be high in gluten. So you've just got to be really careful where you source your oats from. You'll find that most health food shops will be able to tell you though if theirs is gluten-free or not. Most of them will say contains gluten just as a blanket labelling, but you can definitely find gluten-free oats. So it's just the three grains you really have to be careful for, and if you're a celiac, please explore this a lot more. But for general gluten-free advice, avoid wheat, rye and barley. Now barley is interesting, they use it a lot for Milo, they'll use it for making malt, they'll use it on rice bubbles and cornflakes, so you've got to be really careful as well. It gets used a lot. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about gluten and why it's bad. Gluten comes from the Latin word that means glue, and that's pretty much what it does. And when you see it used in flours and breads, it creates a real sticky consistency. Now in Australia, our palate has really developed to like that consistency, and it also makes the bread rise up and stay kind of drawn together, so we get these nice risen crunchy breads which we all demand. The downside is they contain gluten. Now gluten for a lot of people is very hard to break down, and what it tends to do is set up a reaction inside your stomach, and that reaction can do one of three things. It can create stomach problems, so anyone with bloating, irritable bowel, as adults we can get Crohn's and other diseases and develop a full-blown allergy, which is celiac disease, where the stomach just goes, sorry, don't like this, you're hurting me. And that's what it does, it sends out all these pain receptors, so you get belly aches, you get cramps, you can get constipation, you get diarrhea, you get a whole range of stomach problems, you get burping, you can even pass blood in your stool. So it's really not a good situation, and there's a rainbow. So you might have mild symptoms, you might have really obvious, bad, unhealthy symptoms. So they're the gut symptoms you can get if you've got a gluten issue. There are two other areas though. As parents, you need to be really, really onto these. So the first one's the head. Now, in children, what you can see if there's a slight gluten intolerance or sensitivity, they'll either be cranky after they've had it. So little kids can tap their heads, they've got a slight headache. As grown-ups we get headaches, but kids don't verbalise it as a headache, ouchy head maybe. Some of them will have behavioural issues like ADHD or autism spectrum disorder, and Asperger's have all been linked to gluten intolerance. So if you're parents of children who have those symptoms, certainly look into gluten, because the evidence is now just stacking up that it should be taken out of their diet. regardless of what mainstream medicine is telling you. I went to a very good conference a couple of weeks ago, and the experts in the area just said, get gluten out. It's diabolical. It inflames people's heads. So there's the head symptoms, the stomach symptoms, and the third area, which really I'm starting to see a lot of adults presenting with this as an issue, is skin. In children, you'll see it as eczema, maybe little patches of dermatitis in their creases and folds. They might just have the little folliculitis, so the little spots on their arms. In grown-ups, we get similar things. The eczema is not usually as bad, but we certainly get that, what's it called, keratosis pilaris, which is the fine bumps on your arms or legs, and that can be a gluten-driven thing. But certainly any eczema, any skin problems, acne, straight away I'll look to the person's diet and see if it's a gluten-triggered thing. So those are three areas that you may find your children are presenting with, either sore tummies with changing bowel motions, headaches or behavioural problems, so head stuff, or skin issues. You can go and see a nutritionist to really pinpoint this down. Nutritionists, time and time again, are good because they use food to heal, as opposed to a dietitian who are really good at other stuff. If you are really concerned, you can go to a doctor, but be aware if they do the test for celiac disease. In Australia, they accept an antibody level up to 25. This is probably too high. It probably should be set at about 10, because if you're what they measure is your body's reactivity to gluten, and they're letting it really bubble up quite high, where there's lots of symptoms being displayed during that time, but because your blood test hasn't hit 25, they say, no, you're fine. So in the meantime, you're going to miss out and have all those symptoms. So just be a little bit wise. If you do go mainstream medicine, their testing for it's not as maybe as sensitive as it could be, and that will change in time, I'm sure. And at the moment in Australia, gluten sensitivity sits at least 1 in 10 people. So if you've got a family of 5, or another family of 5, one in that group is going to be gluten sensitive or gluten allergic. Now I just pulled in a couple of gluten-free things to show you. These guys are not gluten-free. They're made from rye. They're wheat-free. So some people have an issue with wheat and not gluten. Fine. If you've got an issue with gluten, can't have that guy. Rice is gluten-free. So we'll have sushi quite a lot in our family because we try and stick away from gluten. All your seeds and nuts are gluten-free. So this is almond meal, made from nuts, almonds. We use this a lot for our baking, and it's gluten-free. And you can get gluten-free flours. Now this one's made from soy, and you've just got to be really careful with soy, because once again, like the rolled oats, it is going through this massive change of genetic modification. So there are good soys and there are bad soys. You've also got to be careful when you get gluten-free products. They're using a lot of, this one's just got maize, which is corn, tapioca, which is a potato, soy and rice. But a lot of them are using thickeners, vegetable gums, 1442 and things like that, and a lot of them have other spin-offs with children and behavioural issues. So just try and get something as clean as possible. And that's kind of it. I am holding a webinar on gluten, and that will go for an hour, and that's towards the end of July. So if you're interested, go to the healthqueen.com.au website and subscribe for that. And I also have a blog for gluten and just other issues I post on there, and that of course is free. And that one's www.avoidgluten.blogspot.com. Anyway, I've been the Health Queen. It's been a joy as always, and thank you very much.